The November rain hammered against the windows of the Bellingham estate in Potomac, Maryland, turning the manicured lawns into mirrors of gray sky. Inside the sprawling mansion, 28-year-old Amara Jenkins moved through the marble hallways with practiced invisibility, her cleaning cartwheels barely making a sound against the imported Italian floors. She had worked for the Al-Rahman family for 11 months now, and in all that time she had mastered the art of being present without being seen. It was a survival skill she'd learned growing up in Southeast D.C., where being noticed often meant trouble. Here, in this world of Middle Eastern oil money and diplomatic immunity, the same rule applied, just with better furniture. Khalid al-Rahman, the 26-year-old heir to a Saudi petroleum empire, occupied the east wing of the estate. Amara had cleaned his rooms countless times, always when he was out conducting business in downtown Washington. She knew the scent of his cologne, the way he left his Wall Street journals folded on the nightstand, the precise angle he preferred his desk chair, but she had never had a real conversation with him. Their interactions consisted of brief nods, instructions relayed through his assistant, and the occasional dismissive wave when she entered a room he was using. That Thursday afternoon, Amara was polishing the brass fixtures in the main corridor when she heard raised voices coming from Khalid's private study. She froze, her hand still on the doorknob she'd been cleaning. The voices grew louder, angrier. One was Khalid's, with its distinct British Arabic accent from his years at Oxford. The other was unfamiliar, harsh, and speaking in rapid Arabic. Amara's instinct told her to leave, to push her cart away and pretend she'd heard nothing. But something in the tone, the desperate edge in Khalid's voice, made her hesitate. She had grown up with 5 brothers in a neighborhood where you learned to read danger in the air like weather patterns. And right now, every nerve in her body was screaming warning. She abandoned her cart and moved quietly toward the study door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Khalid standing behind his mahogany desk, his usually composed face tight with tension. Across from him stood a man in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide the violence in his posture. "You think you can just walk away from this, Khalid?" the man said, switching to English with a thick accent. "Your father made promises. Contracts were signed." "My father's business deals died with him," Khalid replied, his voice steady but strained. "I'm not continuing his weapons arrangements. I've already informed Riyadh." If you're enjoying this story of courage and unexpected connections, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next incredible true story. You don't get to make that choice. The man's hand moved to his jacket, and Amara's blood turned to ice as she saw the glint of metal. "Your father understood the consequences of betrayal. Perhaps you need the same lesson." Everything happened in fragments of seconds. The gun clearing the man's jacket, Khalid's eyes widening, his hand reaching uselessly toward his desk drawer, Amara's body moving before her mind could process the decision, her legs carrying her through the door with a speed born of pure instinct. She had protected her younger brothers from street violence. She had thrown herself between her mother and her father's fists more times than she could count before he left. This was no different, her body told her, even as her mind screamed that she was just the maid, that this wasn't her fight, that these people would never do the same for her. The gunshot was deafening in the wood-paneled room, a sound that seemed to crack the very air. Amara felt the impact like a truck hitting her shoulder, spinning her around. She saw Khalid's face frozen in shock and disbelief as she fell. The Persian rug rushed up to meet her and she tasted blood in her mouth. More gunshots followed, but these sounded different, distant. She heard shouting, feet pounding on marble, then Khalid's voice, urgent and close, speaking Arabic into a phone. His hands pressed against her shoulder, trying to stop the blood that she could feel soaking through her uniform. Don't move," he was saying, his English suddenly thick with panic. "The ambulance is coming. Stay with me. What's your name? Tell me your name." Oh, she wanted to tell him that she'd worked for him for almost a year, that she knew he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, that she'd been invisible to him every single day, but the words wouldn't come. The ceiling above her was decorated with intricate molding, she noticed. Details she'd cleaned 100 times but never really looked at. It was beautiful. Everything was becoming softer, quieter, like sinking into warm water. "Amara," she managed to whisper. "My name is Amara Jenkins." "Amara," Khalid repeated, his voice breaking. "Stay awake, Amara. Please. Don't leave. I'm right here." But the darkness was already pulling her under, and the last thing she saw was his face. This man who had never truly seen her, looking at her like she was the most important person in the world. When consciousness returned, It came in waves, like surfacing from deep water. Amara became aware of sounds first, the steady beep of monitors, hushed voices speaking in Arabic, the rustle of expensive fabric, then pain, radiating from her shoulder like fire. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. "She's waking up." A woman's voice speaking English with an American accent. "Mr. Al-Rahman, she's waking up." Amara forced her eyes open and immediately wished she hadn't. The hospital room was filled with people, not doctors and nurses, though several of those were present, but men in traditional Saudi dress, thobs so white they seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, gold watches catching the light, women in designer abayas, their faces uncovered, watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to something that looked almost like reverence, and Khalid, standing closest to her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was still stained with blood, her blood, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion, and something else she couldn't name. "You're awake," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. Thank God you're awake." Amara's throat felt like sandpaper. A nurse immediately appeared with ice chips, helping her take small sips of water while the room full of strangers continued to stare at her with an intensity that made her want to disappear under the hospital blankets. "Where am I?" she managed to ask, though she knew it was a stupid question. The beeping monitors and antiseptic smell made it obvious. "George Washington University Hospital," Khalid answered, moving closer to her bedside. "You've been unconscious for 14 hours. The bullet went through your shoulder, damaged the rotator cuff, but missed all major arteries. The doctors say you were incredibly lucky." Lucky? Amara almost laughed, but the pain stopped her. She'd taken a bullet for a millionaire who had never known her name until she was bleeding on his floor. That didn't feel like luck. "The man with the gun?" she asked. Khalid's jaw tightened. "Dead. My security team arrived within 90 seconds. He fired at them, they returned fire. It's being handled by the State Department due to diplomatic complications." Of course it was being handled. These people existed in a different world, where attempted murders became diplomatic complications and bodies were disappeared behind walls of lawyers and government officials. Why? The question came from an older man standing near the window, wearing a pristine white thobe with gold trim that screamed wealth and authority. He spoke English with a slight British accent, the kind that came from elite boarding schools. "Why did you do it, Miss Jenkins? You had no obligation to my nephew. You could have run, called for help, protected yourself. Instead, you threw yourself in front of a bullet meant for him. I need to understand why." Amara looked at him, then at Khalid, then at all the other faces watching her like she was some kind of puzzle to be solved. How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? That in that split second she hadn't thought about obligation or consequences or the vast gulf between their worlds? That her body had moved on instinct, the same instinct that had made her protect her brothers, her mother, anyone who needed protecting? "I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't watch someone die. Not when I could do something about it." The older man studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he turned to Khalid and spoke in rapid Arabic. Khalid responded in the same language, his tone respectful but firm. The conversation went back and forth for several minutes while Amara lay there, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with her audience. Finally, Khalid turned back to her. "Miss Jenkins, Amara, this is my uncle, Sheikh Abdullah Al-Rahman. He's the head of our family and oversees our business interests in the United States." Sheikh Abdullah approached her bed, and despite her pain and confusion, Amara found herself trying to sit up straighter. There was something about his presence that commanded respect without demanding it. "Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice formal but not unkind, "what you did today was an act of extraordinary courage. In our culture, such an action creates a debt that cannot be repaid with mere money or words. You saved the life of my brother's only son. You placed his survival above your own. This is not something my family takes lightly." "I was just doing what anyone would do," Amara said, though she knew that wasn't true. "Most people would have run." "No," Sheikh Abdullah said firmly. "Most people would have saved themselves. You chose differently, and now we must choose how to honor that choice." Before Amara could respond, the door opened and 2 DC police detectives entered, their badges already out. The room's atmosphere shifted immediately, becoming tense and formal. "Miss Jenkins," the lead detective, a black woman in her 40s with tired eyes, said, "I'm Detective Marcus. This is my partner, Detective Liu. We need to ask you some questions about what happened at the Bellingham estate yesterday." "She just woke up," Khalid interjected. Surely this can wait until— It's fine, Amara interrupted. She'd dealt with cops her whole life in Southeast DC. She knew how this worked. Better to cooperate now than have them think she had something to hide. Sheikh Abdullah made a gesture, and the room cleared immediately. All those wealthy strangers filing out like water draining from a sink. Only Khalid remained, and when Detective Marcus looked at him pointedly, he said, "I'm staying. I'm a witness to what happened, and Miss Jenkins may need someone to speak on her behalf." Detective Marcus didn't argue. She pulled out a recorder, stated the date and time, and began asking questions. Amara told her everything, from hearing the raised voices to recognizing the threat in the gunman's posture, her decision to intervene, the shooting. Her voice remained steady even when describing the moment the bullet hit her, though her hands trembled beneath the hospital blanket. "You worked for the Al-Rahman family for 11 months, Detective Liu said, consulting his notes. "Did you ever hear Mr. Al-Rahman discuss business dealings that might have led to this confrontation?" "I'm a maid," Amara said flatly. "Nobody discusses business in front of the help. I clean rooms and stay invisible, that's the job." Detective Marcus's expression softened slightly, recognition flickering in her eyes. She understood the reality Amara was describing, in a way her partner probably never would. The gunman was identified as Rashid Maliki, a Syrian national with suspected ties to weapons trafficking. Detective Marcus continued, "Were you aware of any connection between Mr. Al-Rahman and illegal arms dealing?" "No," Khalid said sharply before Amara could respond. "Because there is no connection. Rashid Maliki was involved in business with my late father. Arrangements I terminated immediately upon assuming control of the family's American operations 6 months ago. He came to my home to threaten me into continuing those arrangements. I refused. He drew a weapon. Miss Jenkins intervened. That's the entire story." Detective Liu made notes, his expression skeptical. "And your security team just happened to arrive at the exact moment Maliki drew his weapon?" "My security team was already en route because I'd triggered a silent alarm when Maliki first became aggressive," Khalid replied coolly. "The entire encounter was recorded by security cameras. I'm sure your department has already reviewed the footage." The detectives exchanged glances. They had reviewed it, Amara realized. This interview wasn't about gathering information. It was about seeing if anyone's story would contradict what the cameras had already shown. After another 20 minutes of questions, the detectives finally left, handing Amara a card and telling her they'd be in touch if they needed anything else. The moment the door closed behind them, Khalid released a breath he'd been holding. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry you're caught up in this, in my family's complications." Amara looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since waking up. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless hours. He looked human in a way he never had before, vulnerable and real, rather than the distant figure she'd cleaned up after for months. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "I mean, you visited, you made sure I was okay, you don't owe me anything else." Khalid pulled a chair close to her bedside and sat down heavily. "Don't owe you?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Amara, you took a bullet for me. A bullet meant for my heart. You almost died saving someone who never even had the decency to learn your name until you were bleeding on my floor. I owe you everything. I'm just the maid," Amara said, the words coming out more bitter than she intended. "I'm not part of your world. Tomorrow, next week, you'll go back to your mansions and your business deals, and I'll go back to being invisible, if I even still have a job." "About that," Khalid said, and something in his tone made Amara's stomach tighten with anxiety. "My family has been discussing your situation, what you did, what it means, how we should respond." Here it comes, Amara thought. The generous severance package, the non-disclosure agreement, the polite but firm dismissal. They couldn't have someone around who'd seen them at their most vulnerable, who knew their secrets. "My uncle wants to offer you a position," Khalid continued. "Not as a maid, as part of the family's personal staff. A salaried position with full benefits, health insurance, retirement plan. You'd be assigned to assist with various household management duties, coordinating between properties, overseeing other staff. It would be a significant promotion." Amara stared at him, trying to process the words. "A promotion, not a dismissal. But there's another option," Khalid added, his dark eyes intense on hers. "One I'd like to propose personally. Come work directly for me, not as household staff, but as my personal assistant. I need someone I can trust absolutely, someone who's proven they'll act with integrity even when there's no benefit to themselves, someone who sees me as a person, not just a bank account or a diplomatic connection. You don't even know me, Amara protested. You never spoke to me before yesterday. That's my failing, not yours, Khalid said quietly. I was raised in a world where servants were invisible, where wealth created walls between people. But yesterday you shattered those walls. You reminded me that character has nothing to do with money or status, and I want to learn from that. I want to be someone worthy of the sacrifice you made. Amara's head was spinning, and not just from the pain medication. 24 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was lying in a hospital bed with job offers from millionaires and a Saudi sheikh who apparently wanted to honor her courage. I need to think, she said finally. This is all too much. I just woke up, and people are talking about my future like it's already decided. Of course, Khalid said immediately, standing up. I'm sorry. That was thoughtless. You need rest. Time to heal. We can discuss all of this later. But Amara, I want you to know something. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. In my culture, when someone saves your life, it creates a bond called hayat debt, life debt. It means your life is now intertwined with mine, and I have a sacred obligation to ensure your well-being and honor your sacrifice. This isn't about charity or pity. It's about recognizing that you gave me something I can never fully repay. He left before she could respond, and Amara was alone with her thoughts for the first time since waking up. Through the hospital window, she could see the Washington Monument in the distance, that familiar symbol of American ideals standing tall against the gray November sky. She'd lived her whole life in this city, in its shadows and margins, working invisible jobs and keeping her head down. Now, everything had changed because of one split-second decision, and Amara had no idea if she'd made the worst mistake of her life or opened a door to something she'd never imagined possible. Her phone, which someone had retrieved from the estate, buzzed on the bedside table. Her younger brother Marcus had sent a string of increasingly frantic texts asking why she wasn't answering, if she was okay. Had she seen the news? What news? She opened her phone's browser and immediately understood. The shooting at the Bellingham estate was national news. Black Maid takes bullet for Saudi employer, read one headline. Heroic act saves millionaire's life, read another. There were already think pieces about race, wealth, and the American dream. Her story, her choice, was being dissected and debated by people who'd never lived her life. Amara closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. Tomorrow she'd deal with the reporters, the questions, the decisions about her future. Tonight she just needed to survive the pain and the strange new reality that her life had become. But as she drifted towards sleep, one question kept circling through her mind. Had she really saved Khalid's life out of pure instinct? Or had some part of her, buried deep, been hoping for exactly this, for a chance to be seen, to matter, to escape the invisible cage she'd lived in for so long? The answer scared her more than the bullet had. 3 days later, Amara was discharged from the hospital with her arm in a sling, a bottle of pain medication, and an overwhelming sense of displacement. She'd expected to take an Uber back to her studio apartment in Anacostia, the same cramped space she'd lived in since aging out of foster care at 18. Instead, a black Mercedes waited at the hospital entrance, and Khalid himself stood beside it, ignoring the light drizzle that dampened his tailored suit. You don't have to do this, Amara said as he opened the rear door for her. I can get home on my own. I know you can, Khalid replied, but humor me, please. The ride through Washington was quiet, the city gray and subdued under November clouds. Amara watched familiar streets slide past, the gradual transition from the gleaming monuments and government buildings to the worn neighborhoods of Southeast D.C. She waited for Khalid to say something about the boarded-up windows, the clusters of men on corners, the visible poverty that marked her part of the city, but he remained silent, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. When they pulled up to her building, a converted warehouse split into tiny apartments, Khalid finally spoke. Will you let me walk you up? It's not the kind of place you're used to, Amara warned. I'd still like to see where you live, if that's all right. They climbed 3 flights of stairs, Amara moving slowly to protect her injured shoulder. Her apartment was on the top floor, a single room with a kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, and a Murphy bed that she pulled down from the wall each night. The November light through the single window was weak and watery. Khalid stood in the doorway and Amara watched him take it all in. The thrift store furniture, the hot plate because the building's ancient stove had stopped working months ago, the stack of library books on the windowsill because she couldn't afford her own. She'd kept it clean and organized, made it as much of a home as she could. but seeing it through his eyes made her acutely aware of how small her world had been. "You lived here while working for my family," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "The pay was good compared to other housekeeping jobs," Amara said defensively. "I was saving up. Had a plan." "What kind of plan?" She hesitated, then figured she had nothing to lose. "Community college. Maybe a degree in social work. I wanted to help kids in the foster system, kids like I was. Give them someone who understood." Khalid was quiet for a long moment, still standing in her doorway like he was afraid to intrude further. Finally he said, "Amara, I need to tell you something. The media attention from what happened, it's not going away. There are reporters camped outside my estate, outside this building. They want interviews. They want your story. My family has hired security for you, whether you accept our job offers or not. There are 2 men posted downstairs right now." "What?" Amara moved to the window and looked down. Sure enough, 2 men in dark suits stood on the sidewalk, clearly watching her building. "I didn't ask for security. I don't need people following me around. 3 days ago, someone tried to kill me over my father's business dealings," Khalid said, his voice hard. "Rashid Maliki wasn't working alone. The FBI has identified at least 2 other individuals connected to the weapons trafficking ring who might view you as either a target or a means to get to me. The security isn't optional, Amara. It's necessary." The reality of that hit her like cold water. She'd been so focused on her physical recovery and the surreal job offers that she hadn't fully processed the broader implications. She'd put herself in the middle of something dangerous, something that didn't end just because Maliki was dead. "I didn't think about that," she admitted quietly. "I just reacted in the moment." "I know. That's what makes what you did so remarkable." Khalid finally stepped fully into the apartment, closing the door behind him. "But it also means your life has fundamentally changed. You can't go back to being invisible. People know your name now. Your face has been on national news. And whether we like it or not, you're connected to my family's situation." Amara sank onto her second-hand couch, suddenly exhausted. "So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that my entire life has been turned upside down? Let your family dictate what happens next?" "No," Khalid said, and he crouched down so he was at eye level with her, his expression earnest. "You make your own choice, but I'm asking you to make it with full information. If you want to refuse my uncle's offer and my offer, that's your right. We'll still provide security, still ensure you're protected. But Amara, I meant what I said at the hospital. I want you to work with me, not for me. I want someone in my life who'll tell me the truth, who'll challenge me when I'm wrong, who sees past the money and the name." "Why me?" Amara asked. "You could hire anyone, someone qualified, someone with experience in your world. Because qualified people with experience in my world are exactly what I don't need. They're too invested in maintaining the status quo, too afraid to question the system. You're not. You proved that when you threw yourself in front of a bullet." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "My father built his fortune on deals that I'm discovering were increasingly questionable. Arms sales to buyers who shouldn't have had access to them. Money laundering disguised as legitimate investments. I'm trying to clean it all up, to rebuild our business on ethical foundations. But everyone around me has ties to the old ways. I need someone who isn't compromised by that history." Amara studied his face, looking for deception or manipulation, but all she saw was genuine intensity. A young man carrying a burden he hadn't chosen, but was determined to bear honorably. "Let me tell you about my life," she said finally. "Not the sanitized version, the real one. I was born to a crack-addicted mother who kept me just long enough to get welfare checks before abandoning me when I was 6. I went through 7 foster homes before I was 12. Some were okay, some were hell. I learned to protect my younger foster siblings because nobody else would. When I aged out of the system, I had nothing. No family, no money, no prospects. I worked 3 jobs to afford this place. I've been invisible my whole life because that's how people like me survive." She met his eyes directly. "So forgive me if I'm skeptical when a millionaire tells me he wants me as a partner rather than an employee. I've seen what happens when people like you try to help people like me. It's pity dressed up as opportunity, and it disappears the moment it becomes inconvenient." Khalid didn't flinch from her words. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You're right to be skeptical, and I can't prove my intentions with words, only with actions over time. So here's what I propose. Take the assistant position on a trial basis. 6 months. Full salary, benefits, everything I described at the hospital. If at any point you decide I'm full of shit, that this is just a rich man playing at redemption, You walk away with 6 months severance and a reference that'll get you any job you want. But give me a chance to prove that I mean what I say." Before Amara could respond, her phone rang. Her brother Marcus. She answered, and his frantic voice immediately filled her ear. "Ree, where are you? Are you okay? I saw on the news about the shooting and I've been trying to reach you for days." "I'm fine, Mark. I'm at home. I just got out of the hospital." "The hospital? Jesus, Ree, you got shot? Why didn't you call me?" "Because you would have worried, and there was nothing you could do," Amara said, trying to keep her voice calm even as guilt washed over her. She and Marcus had always been close. Two foster kids who'd found each other in the system and stayed connected even after they'd aged out. "I'm okay, really. The bullet went through clean. I'm coming over," Marcus said immediately. "Don't argue. I'm already on the metro." He hung up before she could protest. Amara looked at Khalid apologetically. "My brother. He's probably going to be very protective and possibly rude to you." "As he should be," Khalid said. "Family protecting family. That's something I understand." 20 minutes later, Marcus burst through her door, all 23 years of him radiating anger and fear. He'd clearly run from the metro station, his winter jacket soaked with rain. He pulled Amara into a careful hug, mindful of her injured shoulder, then turned to face Khalid with undisguised hostility. "You're the Saudi guy," Marcus said flatly. "The one she took a bullet for." "I am," Khalid replied, not backing down from Marcus's aggressive posture. "Your sister saved my life. And now what? You're here to pay her off? Give her some money and make her sign something saying she won't talk to the press?" "Marcus," Amara said sharply, "that's not what's happening." "Then what is happening, Ree? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a rich guy trying to control the narrative." Khalid could have gotten angry, could have pulled rank or wealth or any number of power plays. Instead, he said quietly, "Your sister is the bravest person I've ever met. She didn't hesitate, didn't calculate the cost. She just acted to save someone's life. That's rare. That's extraordinary. And yes, I want to repay that. Not with hush money or a payoff, but by giving her opportunities she deserves and has been denied her whole life because the system is rigged against people like her. People like both of you." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "You think throwing money at her erases the fact that you never even knew her name while she was cleaning your mansion?" "No," Khalid said. "Nothing erases that. It was wrong. I was raised to see service staff as invisible, and I never questioned that until your sister made me see how fundamentally fucked up that is. I'm not trying to erase my past behavior. I'm trying to be better going forward." The two men stared at each other, and Amara saw the moment Marcus's hostility shifted slightly, not to trust, but to a wary willingness to listen. Marcus had grown up in the same system she had. He understood the difference between patronizing charity and genuine respect. "Ree makes her own choices," Marcus said finally. "Whatever you're offering, she decides. Not you, not your family. Her." "Agreed," Khalid said immediately. After Marcus extracted a promise that she'd call him every day and threatened Khalid with vague but creative violence if anything happened to her, he finally left. Amara was alone with Khalid again, and the weight of the decision facing her felt overwhelming. "Your brother loves you," Khalid observed. "We're all each other has," Amara said. "When you grow up in the system, you hold on to the people who see you as family." "Then I'll make you another promise," Khalid said. "If you accept my offer, Marcus has a standing invitation to the estate anytime. Family matters. I'm learning that." Amara looked around her tiny apartment, at the life she'd built from nothing, at the independence she'd fought so hard to achieve. Then she thought about Khalid's words, about the opportunity to be more than invisible, to actually make a difference not just in her own life, but potentially in challenging a system that had always been stacked against people like her. 6 months trial, she said finally, "but I have conditions. I keep this apartment. I want my own space, somewhere that's mine and not dependent on your family's goodwill. I want everything in writing, employment contract reviewed by a lawyer of my choosing. And I want to be clear. If I see anything illegal, anything that compromises my integrity, I walk away immediately, no matter how much money you're paying me." Khalid smiled, and it was genuine, reaching his eyes. "Done, all of it. I'll have my lawyers draft a contract and you can have your attorney review it. We'll pay for the legal fees. And Amara, thank you for giving me this chance." "I should be thanking you," she said wryly. "You're the one offering the job." "No," Khalid said seriously. "You're giving me the chance to prove I can be someone worthy of the sacrifice you made. That's a bigger gift than you know." After he left, Amara stood at her window watching the rain, watching the security guards watching her building, watching her entire world shift and realign into patterns she couldn't yet fully understand. Tomorrow, she would negotiate her future. Tonight, she would sit with the strange reality that 3 days ago she'd been invisible, and now, she was the most visible she'd ever been. She touched her injured shoulder gently, feeling the ache that would probably never fully go away, a permanent reminder of the moment she'd chosen to be seen, to matter, to act. Whatever came next, at least she'd chosen it. In a life where so little had been her choice, that meant everything. The contract negotiations took 2 weeks, conducted in a sleek law office in downtown D.C. that overlooked the Capitol building. Amara had found her attorney through a legal aid clinic that served foster care alumni, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who'd grown up in similar circumstances and now specialized in employment law. Patricia went through Khalid's offer line by line, negotiating terms with the Al-Rahman family lawyers like she was brokering a peace treaty. In the end, Amara walked away with a salary that was triple what she'd made as a maid, full health and dental insurance, a retirement plan with employer matching, and ironclad protections written into the contract. If the Al-Rahmans terminated her employment without cause during the 6-month trial period, she'd receive a full year's severance. If she chose to leave, she'd still get 3 months' pay as a transition buffer. Most importantly, Patricia had insisted on a whistleblower protection clause that legally shielded Amara if she reported any illegal activities. They agreed to everything, Patricia said after the final contract was signed, her tone almost suspicious. Usually, families like this fight every protection clause. They want total control, but Khalid al-Rahman's lawyers barely pushed back. Maybe he actually means what he says, Amara suggested. Maybe, Patricia said, but her expression remained skeptical. Or maybe he's playing a longer game. Just promise me you'll be careful, Amara. These people exist in a different world with different rules, don't forget that, Amara promised, though she wasn't entirely sure what being careful meant in this context. How did you protect yourself from people who could buy their way out of almost anything? Her first official day was December 1st, exactly 2 weeks after the shooting. The wound in her shoulder had healed enough that she could move without the sling, though she still couldn't lift anything heavy. Khalid had arranged for a driver to pick her up from her apartment at 7 in the morning, and as Amara slid into the back of the Mercedes, she caught sight of her reflection in the tinted window. She'd bought new clothes for the job, professional but not too formal, dress pants and a blazer that Patricia had helped her choose. She barely recognized herself. The Bellingham estate looked different in daylight, less imposing and more simply massive. The main house was a sprawling colonial revival with white columns and perfectly manicured grounds that probably cost more to maintain than Amara had earned in her entire life. She'd cleaned these halls for 11 months, but she'd always entered through the service entrance in the back. Today, the driver pulled up to the main entrance and Khalid himself was waiting on the steps. "Welcome," he said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "Ready for your first day?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Amara replied. He led her inside, but instead of going to his private study, he took her to a completely different wing of the estate, one she'd never had reason to clean before. "This will be your office," he said, opening a door to reveal a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a mahogany desk that looked antique and expensive, and built-in bookshelves along one wall. Amara stopped in the doorway, stunned. "This is too much. I don't need—" "You need a professional workspace," Khalid interrupted gently. "This is a working relationship, Amara. You're not a guest or a charity case. You're my assistant, and you deserve an environment that reflects that." On the desk was a top-of-the-line laptop, 2 monitors, a phone with a direct line, and a leather portfolio embossed with her initials. Amara ran her fingers over the gold letters, AJ, and felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "The first thing I need you to do," Khalid said, pulling up a chair, "is help me understand exactly what my father was involved in. I have access to his files now, but they're coded, deliberately obscure. I need someone with fresh eyes, someone who isn't invested in protecting his legacy, to help me figure out what's legitimate business and what's criminal activity disguised as legitimate business." He opened a laptop and pulled up a series of spreadsheets and documents. Amara sat down and began scrolling through them, her mind working to make sense of the numbers and transactions. She'd never had formal business training, but growing up poor had taught her to track money carefully, to understand cash flow and debt, and the way people hid financial realities behind complicated language. "This one," she said after 20 minutes, pointing to a series of wire transfers to a company in Cyprus. The amounts are just under the threshold that would trigger federal reporting requirements, and they're always on the 15th of the month, same amount, like clockwork. That's not normal business activity. That's structured to avoid detection. Khalid leaned over her shoulder, studying the screen. How did you see that so quickly? My accountants have been going through these files for months. Because your accountants are looking for standard irregularities, Amara said. I'm looking for the kind of tricks people use when they're trying to hide something. I've seen it before, different scale but same principle. My foster father used to structure his under-the-table income the same way to avoid child support payments. Over the next several hours, they worked through the files together, Amara identifying patterns while Khalid cross-referenced them with his knowledge of his father's business associates. It was painstaking work, but there was something satisfying about using her skills, about being valued for her mind rather than just her labor. They broke for lunch, which Khalid had arranged to be served in her office. Not the fancy catered meals she'd seen delivered to the estate's dining room, but simple sandwiches and fruit, the kind of food normal people ate during a workday. It was a small gesture, but it didn't go unnoticed. Can I ask you something? Amara said as they ate. That day when Maliki came to your study, why were you meeting with him alone? Where was your security? Khalid was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I was arrogant. I thought I could handle him myself, negotiate a clean break from my father's arrangements. I didn't want my uncle or the family's security team involved because I knew they'd want to handle it their way, which would mean threats and intimidation and probably violence. I was trying to be better than that, to resolve things peacefully. He laughed bitterly. Instead, I nearly got us both killed. Got us. You were trying to do the right thing, Amara said. That counts for something. Does it? You took a bullet because I was naive enough to think a weapons trafficker would respect a polite conversation. I took a bullet because I made a choice, Amara corrected. Stop taking responsibility for my decisions. I'm a grown woman. I knew what I was doing. Did you? Khalid asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. No judgment. In that moment, did you really know what you were doing? Or was it pure instinct? Amara thought back to that split second in the study doorway, the way her body had moved before her brain could process the decision. Both, she said finally. Instinct made me move, but there was something else too. I spent my whole life watching people get hurt because nobody stepped up to protect them. I promised myself I'd never be that person, the one who watches and does nothing. So yeah, it was instinct. But it was also a choice I made a long time ago about who I wanted to be. Khalid nodded slowly, absorbing that. You're a remarkable person, Amara Jenkins. I'm just someone who's tired of being invisible, she replied. The afternoon brought an unexpected complication. Sheikh Abdullah arrived unannounced, sweeping into the estate with an entourage of assistants and security. Khalid tensed immediately, and Amara understood why when the older man strode into her office without knocking. Uncle, Khalid said, standing quickly. I wasn't expecting you today. Clearly, Sheikh Abdullah said, his tone dry. He looked at Amara, who had also stood, unsure of the proper protocol. Miss Jenkins, I trust you're settling into your new position. Yes, sir, Amara said, keeping her voice respectful but not subservient. Good. Khalid, a word, privately. Khalid looked at Amara apologetically before following his uncle out of the office. Through the thick oak door, Amara could hear raised voices, though she couldn't make out the words. She forced herself to focus on the spreadsheets, but her attention kept drifting to the argument happening in the hallway. When Khalid returned 15 minutes later, his jaw was tight with barely contained anger. My uncle has concerns, he said stiffly, about the appropriateness of my working relationship with you. Let me guess, Amara said. He thinks I'm some kind of gold digger who manipulated the situation to get close to the family money. Not exactly. He believes my gratitude is clouding my judgment, that I'm elevating you to a position you're not qualified for out of misplaced guilt, rather than sound business sense. The word stung, even though Amara had half expected something like this. Is he right? No, Khalid said firmly. You identified patterns in my father's finances in 3 hours that professional accountants missed in 3 months. You're intelligent, perceptive, and you see things from an angle nobody else in my life can provide. That's not charity. That's good business. But he's the head of the family, Amara said. He can override your decisions. Not in this case. I have independent control of the American operations. It was part of the agreement when I took over for my father. My uncle can advise, but he can't dictate. Khalid paused. then added quietly, "But I need you to understand something."
There will be people who doubt you, who assume you're here because of the shooting rather than your abilities. You're going to have to prove yourself over and over again. It's not fair, but it's the reality. I've been proving myself my whole life, Amara said. This is nothing new.
That evening, as Amara prepared to leave, Khalid stopped her at the door. "There's a charity gala next week," he said. "The Saudi American Business Council's annual fundraiser. I'm expected to attend, and I'd like you to come with me. As my assistant," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Not as a date, but these events are where a lot of business happens, and I want you to start understanding that side of things." "I don't have anything to wear to a gala," Amara said, "and before you offer to buy me something, I can't accept gifts like that. It's in my contract." Khalid smiled. Check Section 7, Subsection C. Professional wardrobe expenses for events required as part of your duties. Patricia Chen made sure that was included. "There's a stipend, and you can spend it however you choose." Amara couldn't help but smile back. Patricia really had thought of everything. Over the next few days, Amara settled into her new role with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She worked with Khalid to document his father's questionable business dealings, preparing files that would eventually be turned over to federal investigators. She sat in on conference calls with business partners, taking notes and asking questions that often cut through corporate jargon to the heart of issues. And she began to understand the complex world Khalid inhabited, where every relationship was transactional, every gesture calculated, and trust was a commodity rarer than the oil that had built his family's fortune. She also began to see the weight Khalid carried. He was trying to dismantle his father's legacy of questionable dealings while maintaining the legitimate parts of the business empire. He was navigating family politics where his uncle questioned his every decision. He was living under constant security threats from people who'd been cut off from profitable arrangements. And he was doing it all while trying to prove to himself and others that he could be different from his father. The night before the gala, Amara stood in front of her apartment's single mirror, wearing the dress she'd chosen. It was elegant, but not ostentatious, deep blue silk that brought out the warm tones in her brown skin. She'd spent the stipend carefully, choosing quality over flash, something that would let her blend into Khalid's world without pretending to be something she wasn't. Marcus had come over to see her off, and he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Ree, you look like you belong in those fancy places." "I don't belong anywhere yet," Amara said. "I'm just trying to figure out where I fit." "You fit wherever you decide to fit," Marcus said firmly. "Don't let anyone make you feel less than what you are." The Mercedes picked her up at 6. When she arrived at the estate, Khalid was waiting in the foyer, wearing a tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. But when he saw her, his expression shifted to something like wonder. "Amara," he said, you look beautiful." "Thank you," she said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You clean up pretty well yourself." In the car on the way to the gala, held at the Kennedy Center, Khalid briefed her on who would be there, which conversations to avoid, which people were trustworthy, and which were likely to report back to his uncle. It was like learning a new language, the coded speech of wealth and diplomacy. "Just stay close to me," Khalid said as they pulled up to the red carpet, where photographers were already gathered. "And remember, you have every right to be here. You're not an imposter. You're my assistant and you saved my life. Nobody can take that away from you." Amara took a deep breath and stepped out of the car into the flash of cameras and the curious stares of DCU's elite. She was about to enter a world she'd only seen from the outside, armed with nothing but her intelligence, her integrity, and the knowledge that she'd already survived worse than whatever these people could throw at her. The real test was just beginning. The Kennedy Center's grand foyer was a river of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over faces that Amara recognized from news broadcasts and magazine covers. Senators, ambassadors, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, all mingling with champagne flutes and practiced smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Amara felt every stare as she entered on Khalid's arm, the weight of curiosity and judgment pressing against her skin like humidity. "That's her," she heard someone whisper, "the maid who took the bullet. I heard she's angling to marry into the family. Opportunistic, if you ask me." Khalid's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her elbow, a silent gesture of support. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They're jealous because you did something none of them would have the courage to do." They moved through the crowd, Khalid introducing her to a dizzying array of people whose names and titles blurred together. Amara shook hands, smiled politely, and tried to remember Patricia's advice. You belong in any room you walk into. Don't apologize for existing. Khalid, my boy. A barrel-chested man in his 60s approached, his tuxedo straining slightly across his midsection. His face was red with drink and good cheer, and his handshake was aggressive. Heard about that nasty business at your estate. Terrible thing, terrible. But I see you've recovered nicely. Ambassador Fletcher, Khalid said smoothly. May I introduce my assistant, Amara Jenkins. Amara, Ambassador Fletcher heads the Saudi-American Diplomatic Relations Committee. Ah yes, the famous Miss Jenkins, Fletcher said, and something in his tone made Amara's shoulders tense. Quite the story you've got. Real American hero stuff. Must be quite a change from cleaning toilets to rubbing elbows with us, eh? The casual cruelty of it took Amara's breath away. Not the overt racism she'd experienced growing up in Southeast D.C., but something more insidious, wrapped in a jovial tone that made it harder to call out directly. Actually, Ambassador, Amara said, keeping her voice pleasant but firm, I find that honest work is honest work, regardless of what form it takes. I'm grateful for every job I've had because each one taught me something valuable, including how to recognize when someone is trying to make me feel small. Fletcher's smile faltered. Khalid's hand moved to the small of Amara's back, a gesture of solidarity. Miss Jenkins is being modest, Khalid said, his voice carrying an edge of steel beneath the politeness. She's proven invaluable in helping me restructure my father's business operations. Her insights have already saved us from several potentially disastrous partnerships. Perhaps if more people approached business with her clarity and honesty rather than playing games, we'd all be better off. Fletcher's face darkened, but before he could respond, a woman's voice cut through the tension. Khalid al-Rahman, I was wondering when I'd run into you. Amara turned to see a striking woman in her early 30s, wearing a black evening gown that probably cost more than Amara's monthly salary. Her skin was pale, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, and her green eyes assessed Amara with the precision of a surgeon deciding where to cut. Vanessa, Khalid said, and Amara heard something complicated in his voice. I didn't realize you'd be here. Mother insisted I attend in her place. She's in Monaco this week. Vanessa's gaze finally left Amara and focused on Khalid. We need to talk about the Riverside Development Project. Your recent decisions have been concerning to several investors. This isn't the time or place, Khalid said. Then make time tomorrow, my office. It wasn't a request. Vanessa's eyes flicked back to Amara. And you are? Amara Jenkins, Amara said, extending her hand. Mr. Al-Rahman's assistant. Vanessa's handshake was brief and cold. Ah yes, the famous shooting. How very dramatic. She turned back to Khalid. Tomorrow, Khalid. Don't make me chase you. She glided away, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and barely concealed hostility. Let me guess, Amara said quietly. Ex-girlfriend? Business partner, Khalid corrected. Vanessa Blackwood. Her family owns half the commercial real estate in D.C. We've collaborated on several projects, and she's not happy that I'm divesting from some of my father's more questionable ventures. It's costing her money. She doesn't like me, Amara observed. She doesn't like anyone who might influence my decisions, Khalid said. Vanessa's used to being the smartest person in the room and having everyone defer to her judgment. You represent a variable she can't control. They moved toward the ballroom, where dinner would be served. Amara found herself seated at Khalid's table, surrounded by business executives and their spouses. The conversation flowed in that peculiar way of the wealthy, where millions of dollars were discussed with the same casual tone someone might use to talk about the weather. So Miss Jenkins, said the woman to Amara's left, a silver-haired executive named Margaret Chen who apparently ran a pharmaceutical company. Khalid tells us you've been helping him review his father's business portfolio. What's your background in finance? It was a trap, delicately set. Amara could see it in the woman's smile, hear it in the slight emphasis on background. The table had gone quiet, everyone waiting to see how she'd respond. I don't have a formal background in finance, Amara said, meeting Margaret's gaze directly. I grew up in the foster care system, aged out at 18 with nothing, and worked my way through various jobs to survive. But that experience taught me how to read people, how to spot when someone's hiding something, and how to see patterns that others miss because they're too comfortable to question the obvious. She paused, letting that sink in. I've found that sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from someone who hasn't been trained to accept the system as it is, someone who asks why things are done a certain way rather than just accepting that they've always been done that way. Margaret blinked. clearly not expecting that response. That's quite a philosophy. It's served me well so far, Amara said. After all, I'm sitting at this table, aren't I? Khalid hid a smile behind his wine glass. The man across from them, a hedge fund manager named David something, laughed outright. I like her, Khalid. She's got fire. The conversation moved on, but Amara felt the shift in the table's dynamic. She'd passed some kind of test, proven she wouldn't be easily dismissed or intimidated. It was exhausting, constantly having to prove her right to exist in spaces like this, but it was also familiar. She'd been doing it her whole life. Dinner was a multi-course affair that seemed designed more to showcase wealth than to satisfy hunger. Amara ate carefully, watching how others used their silverware, when to pause, when to engage in conversation. It was like learning a dance, and she was determined not to stumble. After dinner, there were speeches. The head of the Saudi-American Business Council talked about strengthening ties between the two nations. A senator discussed trade partnerships. A Saudi prince via video link spoke about cultural exchange and mutual respect. The words were polished and empty, the kind of diplomatic language that said everything and nothing at once. Then Sheikh Abdullah took the stage and the room's energy shifted. Amara felt Khalid tense beside her. Tonight, I want to speak about something personal, Sheikh Abdullah began, his English perfect and formal. 3 weeks ago, my nephew faced a threat that could have ended his life, but he survived. Not through his own efforts or the protection of security, but through the selfless action of a young woman who asked for nothing in return. Amara's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected this. Amara Jenkins threw herself in front of a bullet meant for my nephew. She did this despite having no obligation to do so, despite the vast differences in their circumstances, despite every rational reason to protect herself first. In our culture, such an act creates what we call hayat debt, a life debt. It is a sacred bond that can never be truly repaid, only honored. The spotlight found Amara, and suddenly hundreds of eyes were on her. She wanted to sink into her chair, to disappear, but Khalid's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. Miss Jenkins represents the best of what both our cultures value: courage, selflessness, and the fundamental belief that every life has worth regardless of wealth or status. My family is honored to have her working with us, and we hope her example inspires others to look beyond surface differences and recognize our shared humanity. The applause was thunderous. Amara forced herself to smile and nod, even as she felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She'd become a symbol, a story these people could tell themselves about meritocracy and equal opportunity, even as most of them would never hire someone with her background for anything beyond service positions. After the speech, people approached their table in waves, wanting to meet her, to shake her hand, to hear her story. Amara answered their questions with practiced grace, but she could feel herself fragmenting, becoming less of a person and more of a narrative that others could consume and feel good about. I need some air, she finally whispered to Khalid during a brief lull. He understood immediately. The terrace, he said quietly. Through those doors. I'll make sure no one follows you. Amara slipped away, moving through the crowd with the invisibility she'd perfected over years of service work. The terrace overlooked the Potomac River, the December night cold and clear, the Washington Monument visible in the distance. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing deeply, trying to center herself. Running away already? Vanessa Blackwood's voice came from the shadows. She was smoking a cigarette, leaning against the balustrade with studied elegance. Just needed a moment, Amara said. I don't blame you. Abdullah's speech was pure theater. He's trying to rehabilitate the family's image by turning you into a saint. Vanessa took a drag, exhaling smoke into the night air. You realize that's all you are to them, right? A good story, a way to prove they're not just wealthy oil barons exploiting their workers. Is there a point to this? Amara asked, too tired for games. The point is that you should be careful. Khalid thinks he's different from his father, that he can build something ethical out of a fundamentally corrupt empire. But he's naive. This world doesn't reward goodness, Miss Jenkins. It rewards power. And the moment you stop being useful to the Al-Rahman narrative, you'll find yourself discarded like yesterday's news. Why do you care? Amara asked. Why does it matter to you what happens to me? Vanessa studied her for a long moment. Because I've seen what this family does to people who get too close. Khalid's father destroyed lives without a second thought. Khalid wants to believe he's better, but he's still his father's son. And you're in over your head. Maybe, Amara said. Or maybe you're just angry that Khalid's making decisions you can't control. Vanessa's laugh was sharp and bitter. Careful, Miss Jenkins. Khalid may have convinced himself you're special, but to the rest of us, you're still just the help who got lucky. Don't forget your place. She stubbed out her cigarette and walked back inside, leaving Amara alone with the cold wind and her own doubts. Was Vanessa right? Was she just a convenient narrative for the Al-Rahmans? A way to make themselves feel better about their wealth while nothing fundamental changed? Amara? Khalid's voice came from the doorway. Are you all right? She turned to face him, and the genuine concern in his expression made something in her chest ache. Your ex-business partner thinks I'm in over my head. Vanessa's angry because I'm dismantling partnerships that were making her rich, Khalid said, joining her at the balustrade. She's not wrong that this world can be brutal, but she's wrong about you. You're not just a narrative to me, Amara. You're the first person in my life who's been completely honest with me, who sees me as a person rather than a bank account or a business opportunity. How do you know I'm being honest? Amara challenged. Maybe I'm just playing a longer game than Vanessa thinks. Khalid smiled slightly. Because if you were playing games, you wouldn't have just asked me that question. A manipulator would never risk planting doubt. He had a point. Amara looked out at the river, at the lights of the city reflecting on the water. I don't know if I belong in this world, Khalid. Everyone in there either sees me as an inspirational story or a threat. Nobody just sees me as a person doing a job. Then we'll change that, Khalid said, one day at a time. You've already proven you're capable of the work. The rest is just noise. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Khalid added, There's something I need to tell you. The FBI contacted me this afternoon. They've identified 2 more members of the weapons trafficking ring. They want us to testify before a grand jury. Amara's blood ran cold. Us? You were a witness to Malaki's threats. Your testimony could help establish the criminal conspiracy. But Amara, I need you to know, if you do this, if you testify, you'll be putting yourself at risk. These people don't forgive witnesses. I won't ask you to do it, but the FBI will probably approach you directly. When? Amara asked. Probably within the next few days. Amara thought about everything she'd fought for, everything she'd built. She thought about Marcus and the promise she'd made to him to be careful. She thought about the new life she was building, how fragile it still felt. But she also thought about the young girl she'd been, growing up in a system where powerful people made decisions that destroyed lives without consequences. She thought about every time she'd watched someone get away with something because their victims were too scared or too poor to fight back. If they ask me to testify, she said slowly, I'll do it. These people hurt others for profit. They need to face consequences. Khalid studied her face in the dim light from the ballroom. You're sure? I'm sure. I didn't take a bullet just to let the rest of them walk away. Then I'll make sure you have the best protection money can buy, Khalid said. And I'll testify too. We'll do this together. They went back inside together, back into the bright lights and careful conversations, back into a world that still didn't quite know what to make of Amara Jenkins. But she walked with her head high, because she'd made her choice. She would tell the truth, face the consequences, and prove that some things mattered more than safety or comfort or fitting into spaces that were never designed for people like her. The game was just beginning, and Amara was done playing defense. The FBI field office in Washington, D.C., was nothing like the sleek corporate towers or opulent estates Amara had been navigating for the past month. It was utilitarian and slightly worn, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of burnt coffee permeating the hallways. Special Agent Diana Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, led Amara and Khalid into a conference room lined with whiteboards covered in photographs and connecting lines. Thank you both for coming, Morrison said, spreading files across the table. What we're dealing with is a sophisticated weapons trafficking network that's been operating for over a decade. Your father, Mr. Al-Rahman, was one of several financiers who facilitated sales to buyers in conflict zones. We're talking about surface-to-air missiles, military-grade explosives, weapons that have ended up in the hands of terrorist organizations. Khalid's face went pale. I knew it was bad, but it's worse than bad, Morrison interrupted. It's federal crimes carrying potential life sentences. Rashid Maliki was the operational head, but he wasn't working alone. We've identified 2 other key players, Viktor Sokolov, a Russian arms dealer currently believed to be in Dubai, and Marcus Webb, an American logistics coordinator operating out of Baltimore. She pointed to photographs on the board. Sokolov was a heavy-set man with cold eyes. Webb looked disturbingly ordinary, like someone's accountant. Webb is our immediate concern, Morrison continued. He's still in the United States, and we believe he's planning to flee the country within the next 72 hours. We need your testimony to secure arrest warrants before he disappears. Miss Jenkins, your account of Maliki's threats to Mr. Al-Rahman establishes the conspiracy. Mr. Al-Rahman, your father's financial records combined with your knowledge of the business operations gives us the paper trail we need. What happens after we testify? Amara asked. Morrison's expression was grim. We arrest Webb, hopefully Sokolov if we can coordinate with international partners, and we build a case that dismantles this entire network. But you need to understand, these people have resources. They've already tried to kill you once, Mr. Al-Rahman. Testifying will put both of you at significant risk. We'll do it, Khalid said immediately, then looked at Amara. If you're still willing. Amara thought about Marcus, about the life she'd built, about how easy it would be to walk away and let someone else fight this battle. But she also thought about the weapons these people had sold, the lives destroyed by violence funded through their greed. She thought about the girl she'd been, powerless in a system designed to keep her that way. I'm willing, she said. The grand jury testimony took place 2 days later in a secure federal courthouse. Amara sat in a small room facing 23 strangers and recounted the worst moment of her life with clinical precision. She described Maliki's threats, the gun, her split-second decision, the sound of the bullet tearing through her shoulder. She answered questions about the Al-Rahman household, about what she'd observed during her time as a maid, about whether she'd seen anything suspicious. Khalid testified after her, spending 3 hours walking the grand jury through his father's business records, explaining the coded transactions, identifying the money trails that led to illegal weapons sales. His voice remained steady, but Amara could see the pain in his eyes as he systematically destroyed his father's legacy. That evening, they sat in Khalid's study, the same room where Amara had taken the bullet, and waited for news. The FBI had promised to move quickly once they had the indictments. Are you all right? Khalid asked, pouring them both coffee from a silver service that probably cost more than Amara's first car. I don't know, Amara admitted. I keep thinking about what happens next. Even if they arrest these people, there are others. Your uncle made that clear at the gala. This world protects its own. Not always, Khalid said quietly. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes people face consequences. Do they? Or do people like me just become collateral damage while people like you walk away? The words came out harsher than Amara intended, but she was tired, scared, and the weight of everything was pressing down on her. Khalid didn't flinch. You're right to question it, he said. My family has benefited from a system designed to protect wealth and punish poverty. I can't change that history, but I can try to be different. I can use the resources I have to make sure you're protected, to make sure your testimony matters, to help dismantle the networks my father built. And then what? Amara asked. After the trials, after the media attention dies down, what happens to me? Do I go back to being invisible? That depends on what you want, Khalid said. You could stay on as my assistant. You could use the experience you've gained here to move into another position elsewhere. You could go to college. I meant what I said about supporting your education, or, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. You could help me build something new, a foundation focused on helping young people aging out of foster care, giving them the opportunities you never had. You understand that world in a way I never could. Amara stared at him, shocked. You've been thinking about this? I've been thinking about a lot of things, Khalid admitted. About how my wealth could be used to actually help people rather than just generate more wealth. About how to honor what you did by making sure your courage meant something beyond just saving my life. You've changed me, Amara. Made me see the world differently. I want to do something meaningful with that. Before Amara could respond, Khalid's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression shifted to something like relief. Thank you, Agent Morrison. Yes, we'll maintain security protocols. Please keep us updated. He hung up and turned to Amara. They arrested Marcus Webb 30 minutes ago at BWI Airport. He was trying to board a flight to São Paulo. Sokolov is still at large, but Interpol has issued a red notice. It's happening, Amara. Your testimony mattered. The relief that washed over Amara was almost overwhelming. She'd done it. She'd told the truth, and it had actually made a difference. There's something else, Khalid said. My uncle called while you were testifying. He wants to meet with both of us tomorrow. He didn't say what about, but his tone was different, less hostile. The meeting took place in Sheikh Abdullah's private suite at the Four Seasons. He received them formally, tea already laid out on an ornate silver service, his expression unreadable. "Miss Jenkins," he began, "I owe you an apology. When you first came into my nephew's life, I believed you were an opportunist taking advantage of his gratitude. I was wrong." Amara blinked, not sure how to respond. "Your testimony before the grand jury was courageous," Sheikh Abdullah continued. "You could have walked away, protected yourself, let others fight this battle. Instead, you chose to stand up against dangerous people because it was the right thing to do. That is not the action of someone seeking personal gain. That is the action of someone with genuine integrity." He poured tea with practiced grace and handed her a cup. "In my culture we have a saying, the worth of a person is revealed not in comfort, but in crisis. You have proven your worth many times over, Miss Jenkins, and I believe my nephew is fortunate to have you in his life." "Thank you," Amara managed, still processing this shift. "However," Sheikh Abdullah said, his tone becoming more businesslike, "I want to discuss Khalid's proposal for a foster care foundation. It's a worthy cause, but it requires careful planning and significant resources. I've reviewed preliminary budgets and I'm prepared to match Khalid's initial investment. I'm also prepared to offer you a position as executive director, if you're interested." Amara looked at Khalid, who seemed almost as surprised as she was. "I haven't finished my 6-month trial period," Amara pointed out, "and I have no experience running a foundation." "You have experience surviving a system designed to fail young people," Sheikh Abdullah countered. "You have intelligence, determination, and most importantly, you have the courage to speak truth to power. Those qualities matter more than credentials. Besides, we'll hire experienced staff to handle operations. What we need is someone who understands the mission on a fundamental level, someone who won't let the foundation become another wealthy person's vanity project." Over the next hour, they discussed details. The foundation would focus on providing comprehensive support for foster youth aging out of the system, education funding, job training, housing assistance, mental health services, mentorship programs. It would be based in DC but expand to other cities. And it would be guided by people who'd actually lived through the foster care system, not just well-meaning outsiders. As Amara listened to Khalid and his uncle plan, something shifted inside her. This was real. This was happening. Her courage, her choice to protect someone she barely knew, had created ripples that were becoming waves. 6 months later, Amara stood in front of a brick building in Northeast DC, watching workers hang a sign, "The Amara Jenkins Foundation for Foster Youth." Marcus stood beside her, grinning like a fool, and Khalid was on her other side, looking proud. "Still think you don't belong?" Marcus asked. Amara smiled. "I'm starting to think I belong wherever I decide to belong." The foundation's opening gala was nothing like the Saudi American Business Council event. It was smaller, more intimate, filled with social workers and former foster youth and people who actually understood the work they were trying to do. Amara gave a speech about her journey, about how one moment of courage had changed everything, about how they were going to make sure other kids like her had chances she'd never had. When she finished, the applause was genuine, not the polite clapping of wealthy people feeling good about themselves. These people believed in the work. They were part of it. Afterward, as the crowd mingled, Khalid pulled her aside. "I have something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a contract. Not an employment contract this time, but partnership papers for the foundation. She was listed as co-founder and majority stakeholder. "Khalid, I can't." "Yes, you can," he interrupted gently. "This is your vision, Amara. Your courage. Your mission. I'm just providing resources. The foundation should be yours." Amara looked at the papers, then at Khalid, then out at the room full of people committed to making real change. She thought about the girl she'd been, invisible and powerless. She thought about the woman she was becoming, using her voice to challenge systems that had tried to silence people like her. "Thank you," she said simply, because sometimes those were the only words that mattered. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Amara found herself back on a terrace overlooking the city. But this time, she wasn't hiding. She was standing in her own space, at her own foundation, having built something real from a moment of impossible choice. "Not bad for a former maid," Vanessa Blackwood's voice said from behind her. Amara turned to find the woman who'd dismissed her at the gala, who'd told her she was just a story. But Vanessa's expression held something new: respect. "I was wrong about you," Vanessa said. You're not just surviving this world, you're changing it. That's rare. Thank you, Amara said. Vanessa smiled slightly. Don't thank me yet. I'm here because I want to invest in your foundation. Turns out dismantling weapons trafficking networks is bad for business, but helping foster youth creates future customers and employees. Consider it enlightened self-interest. Amara laughed, genuinely amused. I'll take it, as long as you're serious about the work. Deadly serious, Vanessa assured her. Besides, I like backing winners. And you, Miss Jenkins, are definitely a winner. After Vanessa left, Amara stood alone again, looking out at the city lights. Her shoulder ached where the bullet had torn through, a permanent reminder of the choice that had changed everything. But the pain felt different now. Not like damage, but like a battle scar worn with pride. She'd thrown herself in front of a bullet to save a stranger. That moment of courage had opened doors she'd never imagined existed. But more importantly, it had shown her something fundamental about herself. She would always choose to act, to stand up, to fight for what was right, regardless of the cost. And now, with resources and support and a platform, she could do that on a scale that actually mattered. Khalid found her a few minutes later. Ready to go? He asked. Actually, Amara said, I think I'll stay a while longer. This is my place now. I want to take it in. Khalid smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. I'll see you Monday then. We have meetings with 3 potential partner organizations. Monday, Amara agreed. She watched him leave, then turned back to face the city. Somewhere out there were kids like she'd been, invisible and struggling and convinced they'd never matter. But they would, because now there was someone fighting for them who understood exactly what they were facing. Amara Jenkins had stopped being invisible the moment she threw herself in front of that bullet. But she'd found her true voice in the months that followed, learning that courage wasn't just about single moments of action. It was about choosing every single day to stand up, speak truth, and refuse to accept that the world couldn't change. She'd taken a bullet for a stranger and discovered she was capable of taking on an entire system. And that was just the beginning. 2 years had passed since that November night when everything changed. Amara stood in the Foundation's conference room, reviewing applications from the latest cohort of young people aging out of foster care. Each file represented a life, a story, a kid who deserved better than the system had given them. Amara, her assistant, a former foster youth named Jennifer who'd been in the Foundation's first program, knocked on the open door. The senator's here for your 3 o'clock. Senator Patricia Williams had once been one of those skeptical faces at the gala. Now she was the Foundation's biggest advocate in Congress, pushing legislation to reform the foster care system nationwide. Amara had learned that change didn't happen through single acts of courage. It happened through sustained effort, strategic partnerships, and refusing to give up when progress felt impossible. Senator, Amara said, standing to greet her, thank you for making time. Are you kidding? After what your research team uncovered about the group home oversight failures, I should be thanking you. We're finally getting traction on the reform bill. They spent an hour discussing strategy, mapping out which legislators to target, how to frame the narrative. Amara had learned to navigate these conversations with the same skill she'd once used to navigate the streets of Southeast D.C. Different terrain, same survival instincts. After the senator left, Khalid appeared in her doorway. He visited the Foundation regularly now, though he maintained his own business operations. They'd settled into an easy partnership, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. I have news, he said, and something in his voice made Amara look up sharply. Viktor Sokolov was arrested in Montenegro this morning. Interpol finally caught up with him. Amara exhaled slowly, the last major player from her father's weapons network, finally facing justice. It's really over then. This part is, Khalid agreed. But Amara, there's something else. The State Department called. They want to recognize your contribution to dismantling the trafficking network. There's going to be a ceremony, a commendation. My uncle thinks you should accept it. What do you think? Amara asked. Khalid smiled. I think you should do whatever feels right. You've never needed anyone's permission to be extraordinary. That evening, Amara returned to her apartment. Not the cramped studio in Anacostia anymore, but a modest 2-bedroom in Columbia Heights that she'd purchased with her Foundation salary. Marcus was waiting on her doorstep, holding a bouquet of flowers and grinning. What's this for? Amara asked. Can a guy celebrate his sister? Marcus had finished his associate's degree last year with support from the Foundation's scholarship program. Now he was working toward his bachelor's in education, planning to teach high school in underserved communities. You changed my life, Ree. You showed me that we don't have to accept the limitations other people put on us. Amara hugged him carefully, mindful of her shoulder, which still bothered her when it rained. We changed our own lives, Mark. I just opened a door. You walked through it. Inside, over pizza and cheap wine because some things didn't change no matter how much money you had access to. Marcus asked the question he'd been holding back. Are you happy, Ree? Really happy? Not just successful or fulfilled or any of those other words. Actually happy. Amara thought about it seriously. She thought about the kids the foundation had helped, the systems they were changing, the life she'd built. She thought about the bullet scar on her shoulder and the choice that had created it. Yeah, she said finally. I am. Not because everything's perfect, it's not, but because I'm doing work that matters. Because I'm not invisible anymore. And I'm using that visibility to make sure other people don't have to be invisible either. That's all I needed to hear, Marcus said. 3 months later, Amara stood in the East Room of the White House, surrounded by dignitaries and press cameras, as the Secretary of State presented her with a civilian commendation for her role in dismantling an international weapons trafficking network. Khalid stood in the audience next to Sheikh Abdullah. Senator Williams was there. Vanessa Blackwood had sent flowers. Patricia Chen, her lawyer, had tears in her eyes. But the person Amara kept looking at was Marcus, standing in the back with a group of young people from the foundation, all of them wearing matching t-shirts that said, "We see you." They'd insisted on coming, on bearing witness to this moment, because that's what it was really about, Amara realized as she accepted the award. Not the recognition or the prestige or even the justice that had been served. It was about being seen, about refusing to be invisible, about standing up and saying, I matter, and so do you. Her speech was brief. She thanked the FBI agents who'd built the case. She thanked Khalid for his courage in testifying against his father's legacy. She thanked Sheikh Abdullah for his support of the foundation. But mostly, she talked about the kids. The ones aging out of foster care right now, scared and alone. The ones working multiple jobs just to survive. The ones who'd been told their whole lives that they were invisible, disposable, that they didn't matter. You do matter, Amara said, looking directly at the camera, knowing that somewhere out there, kids like she'd been were watching. Your courage matters. Your voice matters. Your life matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. And don't wait for permission to be extraordinary. You already are. The applause was thunderous, but Amara barely heard it. She was watching Marcus and the other foundation kids, seeing the recognition in their eyes. They understood. They'd lived it. After the ceremony, as everyone mingled in the reception, Khalid approached her with a champagne flute. To the bravest person I know, he said, raising his glass. To second chances, Amara countered, and to using them well. They clinked glasses, and in that moment, Amara felt the weight of the past 2 years settle into something like peace. She'd taken a bullet for a stranger and discovered she was capable of taking on the world. She'd been invisible and chosen to be seen. She'd survived a system designed to break her and built something that would help others survive it too. The scar on her shoulder would never fully heal, but neither would her determination to keep fighting, keep standing up, keep refusing to accept that things couldn't change. Because they could, because they had, because one moment of courage had sparked a chain reaction that was still rippling outward, touching lives she'd never meet, creating possibilities she'd never imagined. Amara Jenkins was no longer invisible, and she was making damn sure that other people didn't have to be invisible either. That was worth every moment of pain, every challenge, every battle she'd fought to get here. That was worth everything.